The city lights burned bright that evening when Zara stood before the small wedding hall, her hands trembling as she adjusted her second-hand dress. Outside, people whispered and pointed. Some laughed. Others shook their heads in pity. Her mother sat in the back row, face hidden behind a scarf, ashamed to be seen. Her friends had stopped answering her calls weeks ago. Even her boss had warned her, "Marry that mechanic and you're done here." But Zara didn't care anymore. She looked across the room at Tund, the man everyone mocked. He stood quietly in his best shirt, ironed carefully but worn at the edges. His shoes were polished, though the leather was cracked. He smiled at her gently, the same smile that had pulled her from darkness months ago. That smile didn't promise wealth or status. It promised peace. And in a world that had taken everything from her, peace was all she wanted. The registrar cleared his throat. "Do you take this man?" Zara's voice was steady. "I do." Outside, a black SUV idled in the shadows, tinted windows hiding whoever watched from within. All began 6 months earlier on a rainy morning when Zara's luxury sedan died in the middle of traffic. Cars honked angrily behind her. Drivers shouted. People pulled out their phones to record her struggle, laughing as rain poured down on her designer suit. She felt humiliated, trapped, exposed. The city she worked so hard to impress now mocked her without mercy. Then, through the chaos, a man appeared. He wore oil-stained overalls and rubber boots. His hands were rough and dirty. He was nobody important, just a mechanic from the roadside garage. But he didn't laugh. He didn't film. He simply walked up to her car, bent down, and asked gently, "Can I help you?" Zara was too embarrassed to speak. She nodded. Within minutes, Tund had the hood open, tools in hand, working quickly despite the rain soaking his clothes. Drivers stopped honking when they saw him working. The crowd lost interest and moved on. When he finished, he closed the hood and smiled. "You're good now." Zara reached for her purse. "How much?" He shook his head. "Nothing. Some things aren't for sale." Before she could respond, Tund reached into his garage and pulled out an old black umbrella. It was faded and bent at one edge, but it still worked. He held it out to her. "Take this. The rain's getting worse." Zara stared at him, confused. "But you'll get wet." He smiled softly. "I'm already soaked. Besides, not everything broken is beyond repair." He nodded toward her car, then her heart, as if he somehow knew she'd been struggling with more than engine trouble. She took the umbrella, speechless. He waved and walked back to his garage, humming a quiet tune. That night, Zara sat in her apartment staring at the umbrella. It smelled like oil and rain. She tried to forget about him, but his words echoed in her mind. Not everything broken is beyond repair. She hadn't cried in years. But that night, she did. The next morning, she drove past his garage on purpose. She told herself it was just to return the umbrella. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. Days later, Zara returned to the garage. She told herself she only came to say thank you. But when she stepped inside and saw Tund wiping his hands on a rag, smiling warmly, she felt something shift inside her. "You came back," he said, surprised but pleased. "I wanted to return this." She held out the umbrella. He chuckled. "Keep it. Rainy season's not over yet." He gestured to a plastic chair in the corner. "Want some coffee?" She hesitated. The place smelled like engine grease and metal. The walls were stained. But his eyes were kind. She sat down. He made instant coffee in 2 paper cups, stirring it slowly. Around them, the city roared with honking horns and shouting vendors. But inside that small garage, it felt quiet, peaceful. They talked about nothing important, small things, traffic, weather, the way the city never slept. Yet it felt like the most honest conversation she'd had in years. Just then, a small boy ran in, breathless. "Uncle Tund." The boy hugged his leg. Tund smiled and pulled out half a sandwich from his lunchbox, handing it to the child without hesitation. Zara watched as Tund knelt down and spoke softly to the boy. "Did you eat breakfast today?" The boy shook his head. Tund nodded and gave him the rest of his food. "Go on. Share it with your sister." The boy's eyes lit up. "Thank you, Uncle." He ran off, clutching the sandwich like treasure. Zara felt something crack open inside her chest. You gave him your lunch. Tund shrugged. I'll eat later. He needed it more. She stared at him, this man in dirty overalls who had nothing, yet gave everything. In her world, people hoarded wealth, power, and status. They climbed over each other for promotions and applause. But here was someone who fed hungry children without expecting praise. Why do you do that? She asked quietly. He looked at her, eyes steady. Because the world's only as kind as the people in it. She had no response. That evening, as she drove home, she couldn't stop thinking about him. Her friends called him poor. Her co-workers would call him beneath her. But Zara saw something they couldn't. She saw a richness that had nothing to do with money. Weeks passed, and Zara kept returning to the garage. At first, she told herself it was just for coffee. Then she admitted it was for the conversations. Eventually, she realized it was for him. Tund never asked about her job, her car, or her status. He asked about her day, her dreams, her heart. He listened like her words mattered. One evening, as the sun set behind the city's glass towers, Tund wiped his hands and looked at her seriously. Zara, he said softly, I know I don't have much. I live in a one-room flat. I fix old taxis for a living. But I see you, truly see you, and I think you're the most beautiful person I've ever met. Her breath caught. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver ring. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't shiny. But it was real. Will you marry me? Tears filled her eyes. She thought of her friends, her boss, her mother. She thought of the mockery that would follow. Then she thought of his kindness, his peace, his heart. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will. The city would laugh. But she didn't care anymore. The wedding was small and quiet. Only a few people came. Zara's mother attended but sat in the back, face covered, ashamed to be associated with the scandal. Her former friends posted cruel jokes online. Her boss demoted her, saying she'd embarrassed the brand. But when Zara stood beside Tund and said her vows, she felt free for the first time in years. They moved into his one-room apartment overlooking the bus terminal. The walls were thin. The ceiling fan wobbled. At night, the sounds of traffic and street vendors drifted through the window. It wasn't glamorous. But it was home. Tund fixed broken appliances for neighbors. Zara started freelancing, taking small writing jobs to pay bills. They ate cheap noodles by candlelight when the power went out. They laughed at silly jokes. They held each other when the world felt heavy. One night, Zara woke to find Tund standing by the window, staring out at the city lights. What's wrong? She asked. He turned, eyes distant. I wish I could tell you who I really am. She frowned. What do you mean? He smiled sadly. One day. I promise. Tund's kindness became the talk of the neighborhood. Taxi drivers who couldn't afford repairs brought their cars to him. He fixed them for free, saying, "Pay me when you can. Or don't. Just keep driving." Some people called him foolish. Others called him a saint. But Tund didn't care about labels. He simply believed in helping. Zara worried about money. They barely had enough for rent. Yet every time she mentioned it, Tund would smile and say, "Money returns. Dignity doesn't." She wanted to argue, but she couldn't. There was a wisdom in him that money couldn't teach. One afternoon, as she sat in the garage watching him work, a man in a dark suit stood across the street, photographing them through tinted car windows. Zara noticed him and felt uneasy. Tund, someone's watching us. He glanced up briefly, then returned to his work. I know. His voice was calm, almost expecting it. Who is he? Tund didn't answer. He just tightened a bolt and hummed a quiet tune. That night, Zara couldn't sleep. Something about Tund felt like a mystery she couldn't solve. Months after the wedding, Zara received a shocking invitation. Her old company was hosting a charity gala and had invited her as a gesture of goodwill. She almost threw it away. But Tund encouraged her. Go. Show them you're still standing. She borrowed a modest gown from a thrift shop. Tund wore his best shirt, the same one from their wedding. When they arrived, heads turned. Whispers followed them like shadows. Her former co-workers stared, some with pity, others with mockery. One woman leaned to her friend and whispered loudly, "She really brought the mechanic." But Tund didn't flinch. He walked with quiet dignity, greeting the janitors and waiters warmly, asking their names, thanking them for their work. The staff smiled, surprised by his kindness. The guests noticed, the bar, a man in a tailored suit stared at Tund with wide eyes. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Zara noticed. "Do you know him?" Tund glanced at the man briefly. "Maybe." The man approached slowly, voice trembling. "You look just like no, it can't be." Tund smiled faintly. "Enjoy your evening." He took Zara's hand, and they left. Outside the gala, the man from the bar pulled out his phone, hands shaking. He dialed a private number and whispered urgently, "I found him. I'm sure of it. He's here, living like a commoner." On the other end, a deep voice replied, "Are you certain?" The man nodded, though the voice couldn't see him. "Yes, sir. It's your son." Meanwhile, Zara and Tund walked home through the city streets. The night air was cool. Streetlights flickered above them. "Who was that man?" Zara asked. Tund kept walking. "Someone from a life I left behind." She wanted to press further, but something in his tone told her to wait. They walked in silence, hand in hand, the city humming around them. That night, as they lay in bed, Zara stared at the ceiling. She thought about the way people looked at Tund, some with recognition, others with confusion. She thought about the man who'd stared at him like he'd seen a ghost. "Tund," she whispered in the dark, "what aren't you telling me?" He was silent for a long moment. Then he whispered back, "Everything. And nothing." She didn't understand. But she trusted him. A week later, money troubles hit hard. The landlord demanded rent. Bills piled up. Zara's freelance work wasn't enough. One night, frustration boiled over. "Tund, we can't keep living like this," she shouted, tears streaming. "You're too good for this world. You give everything away, and we have nothing left." Tund stood calmly, his face shadowed by the dim light. "If I wanted wealth, Zara, I'd have it." His voice was steady, almost sad. "But I chose peace. I chose truth. I chose you." She stared at him, confused. "What does that even mean?" He walked to her, gently cupping her face. "It means I wanted to know what love looks like without power, without money, without titles. And I found it. In you." Zara's anger melted into confusion. "You're not making sense." He kissed her forehead. "One day, I'll explain everything. I promise." That night, she lay awake, replaying his words. "If I wanted wealth, I'd have it." What did he mean? Who was he really? The questions haunted her, but she couldn't find the courage to demand answers. The next morning, Tund didn't come home. Zara woke to find his side of the bed empty. She called his phone. It was switched off. She rushed to the garage. The doors were locked. Panic set in. She called hospitals, police stations, anyone who might know where he was. No one had seen him. By evening, her fear turned to desperation. She sat on their bed, tears soaking her hands. Had he left her? Had something terrible happened? Just then, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "He's safe. Don't be afraid. All will be revealed soon." Her hands trembled. Who sent this? How did they know? That night, she couldn't sleep. She paced the tiny apartment, heart pounding. The city outside continued its noise, oblivious to her pain. She thought of his strange words, his mysterious past, the man who'd recognized him. Who was Tund? And why did it feel like the world was keeping a secret from her? At midnight, she whispered into the darkness, "Please come back to me." But only silence answered. The next evening, Zara sat numbly in front of the television. Every channel seemed to broadcast the same thing. Breaking news. Her hands froze on the remote. The screen showed the presidential palace, cameras flashing. The president stood at a podium, his face lined with emotion. His voice trembled as he spoke. 7 years ago, my son left this house. He wanted to understand the people he would one day serve. He walked among you, lived among you, loved among you. Tonight, he returns. The camera panned. A young man stepped forward, dressed simply but with unmistakable dignity. Zara's heart stopped. It was Tund. Her Tund. The mechanic. The man who fixed taxis under a bridge. The man who fed street children. The man she married. The president embraced him, tears streaming. "My son, welcome home." The crowd erupted in cheers. Zara's phone exploded with calls, messages, notifications. But she couldn't move. She stared at the screen, mind spinning. The man she'd married, the man the world mocked, was the president's son. Her breath came in gasps. Everything she thought she knew shattered in that single moment. Within minutes, Zara's phone rang endlessly. Former friends who'd mocked her now begged for interviews. Her old boss sent groveling messages. Strangers congratulated her online. Her mother, who'd hidden her face at the wedding, fainted watching the broadcast. The entire city that had laughed at her now scrambled to rewrite the story. Zara sat in shock, unable to process it. Reporters gathered outside her apartment. Camera flashes lit up the windows. She felt trapped, suffocated. Then, a firm knock. She opened the door to find two palace guards in crisp uniforms. "Mrs. Zara," one said respectfully, "the president requests your presence." Her legs felt weak. "Now." The guard nodded. "A car is waiting." She was driven through the city in a sleek black vehicle with tinted windows. People lined the streets, pointing and whispering. The car entered the palace gates, and Zara's breath caught. Marble floors. Golden chandeliers. Walls that seemed to touch the sky. She felt small, out of place. A staff member led her through grand hallways until they reached a private sitting room. And there, standing by the window, was Tund. He turned. Their eyes met. And despite everything, he smiled the same gentle smile from the rain. Tund walked toward her slowly, as if afraid she might run. "Zara," he said softly. She couldn't speak. Tears blurred her vision. You lied to me," she whispered, voice breaking. He shook his head. "I never lied. I just didn't tell you everything." The president entered the room, his presence commanding yet warm. He looked at Zara with deep respect. "You loved my son when the world turned its back on him. You married him when he had nothing to offer but his heart. For that, you have my eternal gratitude." Zara's mind spun. "I don't understand." The president gestured for them to sit. "My son left the palace years ago. He was tired of people who loved his title, not his soul. He wanted to live among ordinary people, to understand their struggles. I allowed it, though it broke my heart." He looked at Tund. "He told me he'd return only when he found someone who saw him for who he truly was." Tund reached for Zara's hand. "And I found you." She looked at him, searching his eyes. "So everything was a test." He shook his head firmly. "No. It was a journey. And you were the answer I'd been searching for." Tund led Zara to a quieter room. Alone, he explained everything. "I grew up in this palace, surrounded by people who wanted something from me. Power, influence, access. I didn't know what real love looked like. So I left." His voice grew quieter. "I wanted to see if kindness still existed in a world obsessed with wealth. I wanted to know if someone could love me without knowing who I was." Zara listened, heart aching. So the garage, the children, the kindness, was any of it real? He turned to her, eyes fierce. "Every single moment was real. The man you married is exactly who I am. The title doesn't change that." She wanted to be angry, but she couldn't. Because he was right. The Tund she loved, the one who fed children and fixed cars for free, that man was real. The palace, the power, those were just details. "So what happens now?" she whispered. He smiled gently. "Now, we move forward together. But I need you to know this world isn't easy. People will want things from you. They'll flatter you, manipulate you. Can you handle that?" She looked at him, steady now. "I handled marrying you when the world called me crazy. I think I can handle this." The next day, the president held a public ceremony. The nation watched as Tund, now addressed as His Excellency's son, stood beside Zara. Cameras flashed endlessly. People cheered. Zara wore a simple but elegant dress, her head held high. The president spoke to the crowd. This woman chose love over status. She saw a king in a commoner. Let her story remind us that true wealth is found in the heart, not the wallet. Within hours, Zara became a national symbol. Magazines called her the woman who saw beyond the surface. Social media exploded with admiration. Her former boss issued a public apology, calling her an inspiration. Her old friends sent gifts and letters, begging forgiveness. Even her mother, who'd been ashamed, now boasted proudly to neighbors. Zara felt both vindicated and overwhelmed. That night, she stood on the palace balcony, overlooking the city. Tund joined her. "How does it feel?" he asked. She sighed. "Strange. Yesterday, they mocked me. Today, they worship me. But I'm the same person." He nodded. "That's why you're perfect for this. You understand that people's opinions don't define you." She leaned into him. "Promise me something. Anything. Don't let this world change you." He kissed her forehead. "I promise." As weeks passed, Zara saw the darker side of power. Ministers approached Tund constantly, flattering him with rehearsed smiles. Distant relatives suddenly appeared, claiming closeness they'd never shown before. Everyone wanted something. Favors. Positions. Influence. Tund handled it gracefully, but Zara saw the weight on his shoulders. One evening, she found him sitting alone in the palace library, staring at old photographs. "What's wrong?" she asked. He looked tired. "This world is exhausting. Everyone wears a mask. I left to escape this, and now I'm back in it." She sat beside him. "But you're not alone this time. You have me." He smiled faintly. "I know. You're the only real thing in this place." But Zara noticed something troubling. The more Tund resumed his royal duties, the less he smiled. The man who once hummed while fixing cars now walked palace halls in heavy silence. She worried. One night, she whispered, "Tund, don't let them take the peace we found." He looked at her, eyes searching. "I'm trying. But it's hard to stay grounded when the world keeps pulling you up." She took his hand. "Then I'll be your anchor." He held her tightly, as if afraid to let go. One afternoon, while organizing their belongings, Zara found an old envelope tucked into Tund's jacket. It was addressed to her, dated months before their wedding. Curious, she opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. Her hands trembled as she read. "Zara, if you're reading this, it means I've finally told you the truth. I'm sorry for hiding who I am. But I needed to know if love could exist without titles, without wealth. You showed me it could. I only wanted you to love me for who I am, not what I represent. Whatever happens, know that marrying you was the most honest thing I've ever done." Tears streamed down her face. She clutched the letter, heartbreaking and healing at the same time. That evening, she found Tund on the palace balcony. Without a word, she handed him the letter. He looked at it, then at her. "You read it." She nodded, tears glistening. "You didn't have to hide. I would have loved you anyway." He pulled her close. "I know that now. But I needed to be sure." They stood together as the city lights flickered below, two souls anchored in truth. That night, Tund led Zara to the grand palace balcony overlooking the city. The skyline stretched endlessly, lights twinkling like fallen stars. The air was cool, filled with distant sounds of traffic and life. He turned to her, eyes serious. "Zara, you didn't just marry a man. You married a purpose. I came back here because I wanted to serve the people I walked among. But I can't do it without you." He knelt down, just as he had in the garage months ago. This time, though, he held no ring. Just her hands. "Will you stand beside me? Not as a title, not as a symbol, but as my partner." Zara's heart swelled. "I already said yes once. My answer hasn't changed." He stood, pulling her close. Fireworks suddenly exploded in the distance, planned by the palace staff. The city below erupted in cheers, unaware of the quiet promise made above them. Zara whispered, "Promise me you'll stay the man from the rain. The one who gave away his lunch. The one who believed in kindness." Tund rested his forehead against hers. "I promise." As long as you're with me, I'll never forget who I am. And in that moment, beneath exploding colors and city lights, they sealed their vow again, not with rings or ceremonies, but with truth. Months later, Zara launched a foundation called the Umbrella Project. It provided food, shelter, and education for street children, the same ones Tund used to feed. The foundation grew quickly, supported by the palace but driven by Zara's heart. She visited communities, listened to mothers, played with children. People loved her not because of her title, but because she genuinely cared. One day, a reporter asked, "How did you go from being mocked to becoming a national icon?" Zara smiled. "I didn't change. The world just finally saw what was always there." Her words became a headline. From mechanic's wife to First Lady of Hope. The story spread across the nation. Schools taught it. Parents told it to their children. But Zara remained humble. She still wore simple dresses. She still greeted janitors and drivers by name. She still remembered the days when she had nothing. And she never let wealth cloud her judgment. One evening, Tund watched her play with children at the foundation. His eyes filled with pride. "You've done more in months than I could do in years." She shook her head. "We're doing it together. That's the difference." One rainy afternoon, Tund and Zara returned to the place where it all began, the roadside garage near the bridge. It had been renovated, turned into a community center, but the memories remained. Tund stood where he once fixed cars, a faint smile on his face. "I was so lonely back then, searching for something I couldn't name." Zara stood beside him. "And now?" He turned to her. "Now I'm home." He walked to the old spot where he'd first handed her the umbrella. Carefully, he placed a new umbrella there, black and sturdy, with a small sign, "For anyone who needs shelter." Zara's eyes filled with tears. "You're still feeding people, just in a different way." He nodded. Kindness doesn't stop when circumstances change. It just grows. As rain began to fall, a young boy ran toward the center, seeking shelter. He saw the umbrella, hesitated, then picked it up. His face lit with gratitude. Tund and Zara watched from a distance, smiling. "That's why we're here," Tund whispered. "To remind people that help is always available. You just have to be willing to give it." The boy disappeared into the rain, umbrella in hand, the cycle of kindness continuing. At Palace Gala months later, Zara's former friends approached her nervously. They wore expensive gowns, perfect makeup, but their eyes were filled with regret. One woman, who'd mocked her the loudest, stepped forward. "Zara, I'm sorry. I was cruel. I judged you, and I was so wrong." Zara looked at her calmly. "Why are you apologizing now?" The woman lowered her eyes. "Because I see now what I couldn't see then. You were braver than all of us." Zara took a deep breath. "I forgive you." The woman's eyes widened, shocked. "Really?" Zara nodded. "Pride blinds before it burns. You were blinded by what the world values. But you can choose to see differently now." The woman's tears fell freely. "Thank you." As they walked away, a journalist whispered to his cameraman, "This story really did change the city." And it had. People spoke differently about kindness now. Children played The Mechanic and the Princess in schoolyards. Love, not wealth, became the new aspiration. The gala ended, but the lesson remained. Zara had shown the nation that true strength wasn't in pride, but in forgiveness. And that the greatest victories were won not by climbing over others, but by lifting them up. Weeks later, the president held a televised address. The nation watched as Tund stepped forward to speak. His voice was calm, steady, filled with conviction. "Years ago, I left this palace searching for truth. I wanted to know if kindness still existed in a world obsessed with power. I found it in the most unexpected place, in a woman who loved me when I had nothing." He turned to Zara, who stood beside him, tears glistening. "She didn't marry a title. She married a heart. And that taught me the most important lesson I'll ever learn. Power isn't about control. It's about service. Wealth isn't about possessions. It's about generosity. Love isn't about status. It's about seeing the soul beneath the surface." The nation watched in silence, moved by his words. He continued, "I'm not here to rule. I'm here to serve the people I walked among, the taxi drivers, the street vendors, the children who go to bed hungry. They are my teachers. And my wife, he looked at Zara, she is my reminder that the richest hearts are the ones that give when no one's watching. The cameras faded to black. But across the nation, people wept. Because they'd witnessed not just a speech, but a truth they'd forgotten. Years passed. The story of Zara and Tund became legend. Parents told it to their children at bedtime. Teachers used it in classrooms. Artists painted murals of the umbrella, symbol of shelter and kindness. The city that once mocked them now celebrated them. But Zara and Tund remained unchanged. They still visited the community center every month. They still spoke to street children by name. They still lived with the same humility they'd carried from the beginning. One evening, as they stood on the palace balcony, Zara whispered, "Do you ever regret leaving the garage?" Tund smiled. "Never. That garage taught me more than this palace ever could. It taught me that love is the truest form of wealth." She leaned into him. "And if you could do it all again?" He looked at the city, lights glowing below like a million small hopes. "I'd do it exactly the same. I'd walk among the people. I'd fix taxis. I'd feed children. And I'd find you." She smiled through tears. "Then we did it right." And somewhere in the city, children played in the streets, shouting, "I'll be the mechanic. I'll be the princess." Their laughter echoed through the night, a reminder that love, true love, doesn't need a palace. It just needs two hearts willing to see each other truly. The richest hearts are the ones that give when no one's watching. But tell me, if you were Zara, would you have married him?